and we are working our way through the Adam Hamilton study, The Walk. I am Mike Carey, pastor of the First United Methodist Church of Nevada, Iowa. It's my pleasure to be able to spend some time with you now around the Word of God and working our way through this particular study. The Walk is about 5 essential principles for Christian growth. If you want to be growing and maturing as a Christian, these are things that just absolutely positively need to be doing, need to be involved in. And we have been talking about service as the third of the five pillars. Excuse me. We haven't finished quite yet, and so we've been talking about service. Oftentimes, people think of service as mission projects, service projects, going out and actively doing something for people, like fixing somebody's porch or front steps or something to that effect. And that is true. That is very much a part of it. I know there are many service organizations that spotlight that kind of thing. I know when I was in Janesville, the local Lions Club went out and did a couple of handicap accessibility ramps for private homes. That was a wonderful thing. And other people, I know many youth groups will go and spend a couple of weeks in the summer doing things like going to Appalachia Service Project, or Mountaintop is what it's called, over in eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky. There are going to be some folks that are definitely in Kentucky, be western Kentucky, I believe, is where Mayville is, far western Kentucky, where the tornadoes went through. And I just will remind you, commend those people to your prayers. I was asked this morning if UMCOR will be doing anything in those locations, and the answer is yes. And will we be receiving a number to send donations to UMCOR for tornado relief for Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, and Missouri? And the answer to that is yes. I will have to research that and find it's so recent. I don't think there's a number out yet. I know UMCOR is on site at several of those locations. UMCOR is usually one of the first groups in, along with Red Cross and Salvation Army, and they're also one of the last ones to leave. And so I commend UMCOR. United Methodist Committee on Relief is UMCOR. Methodists are big on acronyms, but the United Methodist Committee on Relief. And the good thing about giving to UMCOR is that 100% of what you give goes to relief. Nothing goes of your offering goes to administrative costs. There are other organizations, Red Cross, for example. A lot of what the Red Cross does is really good. I am not bad-mouthing Red Cross, but about 50% of what you give to Red Cross goes for administrative costs and administrative overhead. In the United Methodist Church and Catholic Relief and other church-related organizations that do that kind of thing, 100% of what you give goes to relief, because in the case of the United Methodist Church, the administrative costs are taken care of by our apportionments, which is our yearly giving of every individual church to cover things like taking care, running a relief organization, so that what people give to relief projects goes 100%. So that's a commercial. That's a word from our sponsor this morning. Sorry about that, but you are the ones who are asking me about it. So I'm duty bound to be able to get. I will get that number probably tomorrow, and I'll have it posted on our website and on Facebook so that you know where to send relief money to help out with this particular project. Because a lot of times people want to volunteer and they want to go on site and help, and that's good, that's necessary, because a lot of times those situations need all the manpower they can get. However, sometimes if somebody like me were to do that, I'd be in the way. And so the best thing a lot of folks can do is give money. People say, well, can I give goods or blankets or something like that? The best thing, the most efficient thing is money, so that because those outfits already have resources and they know where they can go to get that stuff and to buy it probably as cheaply as possible. And so it just is a more efficient way of doing things. So that ties in very much with service. Being an essential part of the Christian life. Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And if the Lord of all creation came as a servant, how much more so should we be servants as well? Now, along with service, though, along with that, besides going out and doing things for people, carrying in, taking somebody's garbage out, helping the little old lady across the street, that type of thing, and which is all good. There are also other kinds of service. Adam Hamilton, in his book, tells the story of Kevin Hines. Kevin Hines is one of the few people who tried to commit suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and lived to tell the story. Not too many people do, but he is one of the ones that did. But as he was walking out onto the bridge to jump, as many people do, he felt conflicted as to, should I do this? Do I really want to do this? Is the right thing? And so he decided as he was walking out there, because there were other people walking on the bridge, he said, if one person would smile at him, not even talk to him, but smile at him or talk to him, he would not do what he was intending to do. He would not jump. And no one did. If you've spent a whole lot of time in the big city, that's one thing you do not do. You don't smile at people. You don't really even look at people. Plus, you definitely don't look at people in the eye. And when you do, it's shocking. And that's one of the funny things, one of the adjustments that you have to make when you go to small towns. Because in small towns, they do smile. They do look at you. They do wave. And it's an adjustment. It's not that people aren't friendly in the city. It's that a lot of people in the city are there because they prefer anonymity. That's just the way it is. So perhaps, now getting back to Kevin Hines' story about surviving jumping off the Golden Gate, perhaps he speculates that perhaps he lived so that he could tell his story, so that people would know that one small act of kindness would have made all the difference in the world for him. And I believe that. We need to be paying it forward. We need to practice random, unexpected, unprovoked acts of kindness, because you just never know that person that's there in front of you, in line, or behind you, or whatever the case may be. One small act of kindness might make all the difference in the world for that person. So, and that is service, being of service to other people, being kind to people, being friendly to people is, and part of service for the Christian is, and Adam Hamilton makes this point, is the willingness to be interrupted. And I think I talked about this last time. The ministry for the professional minister is really all about interruptions. You get, you're working on a sermon, because for the minister, it may be Monday, but Sunday's a coming. That's always it. In the back of your mind, Sunday's a coming. Got to be ready. And it's not just ready in terms of the sermon, but you got to have your heart and mind, spirit right as well. And that sometimes takes more effort than others. It doesn't just naturally happen, and people don't get that. But, that's the way it is. And so, and that's easy. And so, and then you're really moving and grooving, and you're getting into your sermon, and your things are starting to move for you, and all of a sudden, there's the knock on the door, or the phone rings, and somebody wants something. And that's okay, because while that sermon is important, maybe not as important as I think it is, but you understand what I'm saying. But it's not as important as that person. Now, that person may be calling simply to ask what time and when is the funeral for so and so. But they also may have another agenda, another need. Now, there are people that, they, I'll be blunt here, they make general nuisances of themselves. I mean, they are around way more than what they should, and they have an agenda. They're looking for something, for a handout. And God loves those people too. But there are people that call that, in the middle of your day, unexpected, unprovoked, and they have needs, and they may not realize it, but their call, their stopping in, is what I view as a divine appointment. It wasn't on my calendar, but they're coming in here for a reason, and so it is for me to practice the presence of Christ, to realize that that person bears what we call the imago Dei, the image of God. They are a child of God. They needed to be treated with respect and kindness. Long time ago, another lifetime, actually 2 lifetimes ago, I worked in retail grocery as an assistant manager. Very large store, 24-hour store, and was in Hudson, Wisconsin. And Hudson, Wisconsin, back in the 90s, built a Greyhound racing track. And it was very close to the store where I worked. And I worked at night. I worked the 11 to 7 shift. And one night, a gentleman came in, African American, older gentleman, dressed in uniform for someone who works in the at the dog track. And he was wandering the aisle, looking around, and I finally, he looked like he was didn't know where he wanted to, knew feet where he wanted to be, what he was looking for. So I asked him, which is what we were trained to do, "Can I help you find something, sir?" Now, I have been taught and trained that everybody is sir or ma'am. That's the way I was trained. And he turned and he looked at me like, he'd seen a ghost. And he stuttered for a second, and he said he was looking for the cheese in the cold cut section. And I said, "Well, it's right this way, sir. If you follow me, I'll take you where you want to go." So I did, and got him to where he wanted to be. And he's standing up there. I said, "Is there anything else, sir, I can help you find? Just let me know. I'm around the store." And I looked at him, and there's tears running down his face. Well, immediately, pastor mode kicks in, and I asked, "Are you all right? Is there anything I can do for you, sir?" He says, "I can't remember the last time a white man called me sir." Okay. Number one, that's too bad, in terms of racism. That's terrible. But the second thing is, I didn't, I believe that everybody should be treated with respect, but you never realize or understand just how much being treated with respect and kindness will impact a person, because maybe they don't get treated that way very often. And so Jesus said, even a cup of cold water given in my name, well, a cup of cold water is pretty simple unless you're really, really thirsty. And then it's a really great thing. There you go. So those divine interruptions, you got to realize, got to keep the vocal cords wet here today. And there's nothing better than a cup of hot coffee. It's not all that hot. Oh, before I proceed, just FYI, for those of you who come into church on Sunday morning, we have the coffee pots, the Bun coffee maker working again in the narthex area. But there are 3 coffee pots there, and one of them has the orange handle. And you know that usually a coffee pot with an orange handle means decaf. Just so you know, in this church, there is no decaf. That is one of the few pastoral edicts I have issued. No decaf at all. So it's all don't. So if you grab the orange handled jug of coffee thinking that you're going to get decaf, sorry, it's the real deal. So I'm drinking the real deal here. So I'm getting myself wired up here. But those people, those interruptions, those are divine appointments, and God has placed that person in your path, that situation before you, for a reason. Now, what you do with it is up to you. God's not going to clunk you on top of the head. Although there have been times and situations where I have heard the voice whisper, you need to be involved here. You need to do something with this. And there have been times when I've said, no, I don't want to be. But there you go. It's your choice. God's not going to twist your arm and say, you got to get involved with this. And that's just as much service as going out and fixing somebody's porch. That's the point of, that's the whole point, one of the points of the parable of the Good Samaritan. He allowed the Samaritan, coming upon the man who'd been beaten and left to die there on the side of the road, he allowed his trip to be not only interrupted, but significantly interrupted. Two, holy people, Pharisee and then a scribe also went by on the other side of the road trying to pretend like they didn't see. They weren't going to get involved here or do anything. The Samaritan, allowed his trip to be delayed significantly, and also he utilized his own resources to come to the aid of the man. Two others had the opportunity, and for whatever reasons, none of them probably good, they did not. And you have to understand, remember, there's no love lost between the Jews and the Samaritans. They hated one another. It was a racial, religious thing, and those two things, when they go together, are really, really bad. So, but he helped anyway. He helped anyway. So this makes it clear that a willingness to serve, to do for others, kindness, is more than just a feeling. It's a willingness to be interrupted, to take risks, to sacrifice something of your own for somebody else's well-being, to put yourself out there for other people. So, and that's just as much of a service thing as anything else. So, John Lennon, years ago, who was taken from us way too soon, back in 1981, wrote a song, Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy. It was a side B on not one of his big-time hit songs, but some people think it's one of the most beautiful songs he ever wrote and sang. But there's a line in there that says, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Now, I imagine a lot of other people have said something like that. But Jesus' ministry in the Gospels pretty much was a ministry of interruptions. And life for you and I as Christians is basically that. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. You make your plans, but then life happens, we say. Stuff happens. And you have to deal with it. You really don't have any choice. You can make all the plans you want to. But that's what Jesus' ministry was all about, was interruptions. Jesus noticed when people needed help. Now, a lot of times they came and they asked for help, but he also noticed people who needed help. And Jesus made no excuses. It's, Dr. I was watching Dr. Phil one day. My wife loves Dr. Phil. And every once in a while, I like to sneak in an episode. And he was dealing with one person, and finally he looked at him and he said, do you realize that every answer you have given in response to the other person has been yes, but. Yes, but. You can't have an answer for everything. When are you going to stop and take responsibility for yourself? You can't keep explaining away stuff with yes, but. And that's true for the Christian. Jesus made no excuses. Sometimes you may have a legitimate excuse, okay? I understand that. But interruptions were the most important part of Jesus' ministry. Um, so we need to understand that. And those can be the best part of your life, really. Um, right here, example, in Nevada years ago, when was it, 2003, Nevada Church here underwent a massive, major renovation of the building space to the point where they couldn't use the sanctuary. And so they had to go over across Main Street and worship in the theater. Now, for most people, that would be a major league interruption. And yet, to this day, um, 15, 17, 18 years later, people still remember that fondly. And they remember all the things that happened and did and the things that they did differently. And they remember it as an interruption, but an interruption that basically had a major positive impact on their life. So, interruptions, divine interruptions, showing kindness to people, is just as much an act of service as intentionally going out and fixing somebody else's porch or, something to that degree. You understand what I'm saying. So, let's end this section with a challenge, okay? Would you be willing to commit yourself to doing just one intentional act of kindness a day, 5 days a week? We'll give you the weekend off, okay? But 5 days a week, one intentional act of kindness, and you do it for a month. 5 times a week for a month. 23 days. 23 intentional acts of kindness. Now, if you want an example of this, it's totally non-Christian. You can tell because of the language, but go back and watch the movie Pay It Forward. Although it's, like I said, the language and the ideas are a little on the crass side. I don't like a lot of bad language in my movies, but the situations that are dealt with are life situations for a lot of people. And so it's dealing with reality. But Pay It Forward is a good example of intentional acts of kindness, attempting to do good for other people. And it's a movie I think Christians ought to watch every once in a while, just to remind us of the impact that kindness can have. Another good way would be to find a way to do service within your community. Now, a lot of our people here in our church in Nevada are really good at that. They're very proactive about that. So, like once a month, be involved in one of those things within the church that are attempting to do good. Food at First, furniture, Fresh Start, those types of things. And there's other organizations within the community. Just 1 hour a week, even once a month, with one of those organizations. And, we grow by paying attention and pursuing intentionally acts of kindness. But there's the key word, intentional. We need to be intentional about it. We need to say, Lord, by your grace and mercy and power, I want to make a difference by being kind to people. Now, what I'm suggesting as far as a daily challenge might seem like a little to you, or it might sound like a lot, but by intentionally practicing acts of kindness, service, by offering yourself as a channel of grace and blessing, you will, I guarantee you will grow spiritually. Now, for some of you, this will come naturally. It will be an easy thing for you to do because you're geared that way. Others of us, maybe not so much, might be tougher, but give it a whack. Let me just throw that out to you as a challenge. So that's the whole idea of serving. Now, the next of the practices is giving. Oh, he just done quit preaching and done went to meddling, talking about giving. Boy, we better get close to winding this up. That was the last of the coffee. Let me just read a couple of scriptures for you here this morning, and we'll just get this started because we're running short on time here. But some scriptures here about giving, and we'll start this. We won't get this done in one fell swoop, but from Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The very end of it there. Where your heart is, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. Ooh, that one hits. From Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 38, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap, for the measure you give will be the measure you get back." Oh, now that's kind of the pragmatic, practical side of giving. As you give, so will you get back. Never thought of it that way before, did you? And from Acts chapter 20, verse 35, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Oh, okay. Well, like I said, we just quit preaching and done went to meddling. We've talked so far about, this is the fourth of the four pillars. Worship and prayer, we put those together. And we can understand that, absolutely. Study of the scripture, spiritual readings, writings, and things like that, we can understand that. Service, we just finished up on, we can understand that one too. Now, giving, the connection between your spiritual life and your treasure, your money. Ooh, okay. Now, does that sound odd to you, talking about that as a spiritual discipline? Well, and number one, as a preacher, I hate talking about money and asking people to give. It is totally contrary to my nature. When there have been times and situations when the churches I have served were doing fundraisers and they needed to go to somebody who had deep pockets and they want them to make a specific large contribution to less than so, you know who that falls upon. Preacher, get out there and earn your money. Go and ask so-and-so to make a contribution. And oftentimes, what I've found out is those people are generous, but they're waiting to be asked. And a lot of people will be generous, but they're waiting to be asked. They need to be reminded in terms of giving to charitable causes. Now, a lot of people give to charitable causes and they don't give to the church. That's okay. I understand that, as long as you're trying to do something like that. But the thing that we need to remember is that when you look at the Gospels, you say, okay, well, what did Jesus say about this? Jesus talked more about money and possessions than worship, prayer, study, and serving combined. He talked about money and possessions more than he talked about anything else. And Jesus makes very, very clear that our relationship with money can either sabotage our spiritual life and relationships, or it can deepen and support them. Now, Adam talks about a friend of his whose name is Dan Hutchins. Dan is an accountant and a tax preparer, and he's working on a book, it's probably out now, about tax returns of former presidents and former vice presidents and presidential candidates over the last 50 years. Because up until recently, those people always release their tax returns. In fact, most of them, you can pull them up online yourself and see what they're like. And Hutchins says his theory, the reason for writing this book, is that you can tell a lot about a person by their tax return. Now, I never thought about that. He says your tax return is like a selfie. And he pulls up, he uses the example of a former vice president who claimed an adjusted gross income of $200,000. And okay, that sounds about right. But when you look further, you see that amongst the deductions, they were paying a very high, they had claimed a very high mortgage interest deduction. And Dan says, this tells me that this person is living on the edge of what they can afford. And I'm guessing, he says, that you will see a very low charitable contribution deduction because they're using so much of their disposable income on their home. And he was right. The charitable contribution deduction was $300, which is about 0.1% of $200,000, which is, again, I never thought about that. I thought that was fascinating. Now, I'm going to read from the book for a second an observation here, again, from Dan Hutchins that Adam quotes. And I'm going to read it because I want to get it totally and absolutely right, because it's a little complex, but I think it's fascinating. Dan went on to tell me how he and his associates had developed something called a tax return credit score, a tool that lenders can use to analyze a person's ability to repay a loan. His research found that this calculation was actually a better indicator of a person's ability and likelihood of repaying a loan than someone's FICO score, which is their credit rating. And now, quoting Dan Hutchins, we looked at defaults on home loans from 2008 and 2010 during the very worst of the Great Recession. People who defaulted usually had high enough FICO scores to get their loans and enough adjusted gross income. Those are the two things lenders tend to look at. But they were looking at the wrong information. This is according to Dan Hutchins. Dan went on to tell me that the tax return score they developed looks at the ratio of mortgage interest to income and looks at charitable giving. In fact, he noted 90% of the tax return score is based upon charitable giving. He explained that the people who borrowed the maximum amount possible for their home loan were likely living at or beyond their means with very little to spare. This usually meant that they either placed a low value on making charitable contributions or they simply didn't have the money to do so. They also had no financial margin if there were unexpected expenses. Living at the edge of one's means, having no margin, and not placing a high value on giving were indicators that they might be at greater risk of defaulting. The greater the disparity between what they were paying in mortgage interest and what they gave to charity, the greater their risk on defaulting on their loan. Now, on the flip side, again quoting Dan Hutchins, we found that people who were generous with their charitable giving were people who were, at least as far as we could tell from their tax returns, living below their means and showed evidence that they were thinking about others by their generosity. These people were significantly better credit risks than those who did not give. Wow. I think that's fascinating. I don't know about you. If you want to get the book, The Walk, and read it, it's on pages 89 and 90. Or look up, Google Dan Hutchins, accountant, and see if his book is out on this, if you're really into that type of thing. But that is simply a reflection of what Jesus talked about when he said in Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Fascinating. So we're going to get into this whole idea of giving And I see I've exceeded my time here. We try to religiously keep things to a half an hour here, but we'll get into that then. The whole idea of one of the essentials for Christian growth is giving, and we'll talk about that next time. So, hope you're having a great Advent, that you're getting ready for the coming of the Christ child. And we got Sunday school program, by the way, is this afternoon. The music starts at 4, the program starts at 4:30. So if you're free and you want to come on down to church, that'd be great. So in the meantime, hope the Lord blesses you real good.